The great crystal halls of Nexus Prime sparkled like diamonds under the artificial suns. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and musical tones. Some floated in bubbles of water, others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure energy contained in glowing spheres. Ambassador Jiho Park walked slowly to the center platform, his black human suit looking plain among all the colorful, alien forms. His heart beat fast, but his face stayed calm. He carried with him the most important message in human history, and he knew most of these beings would not believe him. The translation device on his collar hummed to life as he began to speak. Honored members of the Galactic Council, his voice reached every corner of the vast hall. I come before you today with urgent news. Our scientists have discovered something terrible happening at the edge of our galaxy. Jiho pressed a button, and a holographic map appeared above his head. It showed the galaxy as a bright spiral of stars, but along the outer edge, dark patches grew like spreading disease. These are star systems that have gone completely silent in the past 2 years. Not destroyed by war or natural disaster, simply gone. A ripple of sound moved through the crowd. Some aliens leaned forward with interest, but many others made noises. That sounded like laughter. Dr. Minho Kim, standing near the platform, stepped forward with his datapad. We have recorded the disappearance of over 700 star systems, he said, his voice shaking slightly. The pattern is too perfect to be random. Something is moving through space, eating entire solar systems. The Zephyrian delegate, a creature that looked like a giant octopus made of blue metal, waved his tentacles in the air. The humans see monsters everywhere they look, he said through his translator. The sound that came out was like music mixed with the noise of breaking glass. Perhaps if they spent less time building weapons and more time learning peace, they would not jump at shadows. Many aliens in the audience made their species' version of laughter. The blob-like merchants pulsed with bright colors. The insect-like Chitari clicked their sharp teeth together in amusement. Jiho felt his face grow hot with anger, but he kept his voice steady. This is not fear or imagination. We have proof. Our deep space telescopes have recorded the systematic extinction of stars. Our probe ship sent to investigate never returned. We even found ancient ruins on dead worlds that speak of this threat, He-How. Activated another hologram showing strange writing carved into black stone. We call them the Devourers. According to these old records, they came before, millions of years ago. They are machines that consume entire worlds to make themselves stronger. Council Speaker Thrinox rose from his crystal throne. He was 12 feet tall and made entirely of living diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the chamber. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Young Ambassador Park, Thrinox said, and somehow he made the word young sound like an insult. Your species has been part of our galactic community for less than 200 years. The Veloth have kept records for over 2 million years. We have no mention of these devourers you fear so much. The crystal being gestured with one arm toward the human delegation. Humans are known throughout the galaxy for their aggressive nature. You see every unknown signal as an enemy fleet. You turn every natural disaster into a conspiracy. Perhaps this is simply your primitive minds trying to make sense of forces beyond your understanding. More laughter filled the chamber. Even some of humanity's trading partners seemed amused by the suggestion that humans could discover something the older races had missed. Captain Yuna Lee stood at the back of the human group, her military uniform crisp and clean. She watched the alien faces around them and saw dismissal, amusement, and worst of all, pity. Her hand rested on the secure communicator at her belt, ready to send a coded message back to Earth. Dr. Kim tried again, pulling up more data on his holographic display. The pattern is clear. Look at the timing, the direction of spread. Something is moving toward the center of the galaxy at 0.3% of light speed. At this rate, it will reach the core worlds in less than 50 years. 50 years, laughed a merchant delegate, his blob-like body rippling with colors that meant humor in his species. By then your species might have learned enough wisdom to understand that the universe is not full of monsters waiting to eat you. Thrinox raised one crystal hand for silence. The Council has heard the human warning. We thank Ambassador Park for bringing this matter to our attention. However, we see no evidence of any real threat. Natural phenomena can often appear threatening to less experienced civilizations. The crystal being's voice took on a tone that somehow managed to sound both kind and insulting at the same time. Perhaps when your species reaches true maturity in another few thousand years, you will learn to tell the difference between shadow and substance. Until then, we suggest you focus on developing your culture and technology rather than searching for enemies that do not exist. Jiho felt the crushing weight of failure settle on his shoulders. Around him, the greatest gathering of intelligent species in the galaxy prepared to dismiss humanity's warning with a simple vote. He caught Captain Lee's eye and saw her slight nod. The message was clear. If the galaxy would not listen, humanity would have to prepare alone. The vote was swift and decisive. The motion to investigate the disappearing star systems was rejected. The request for a unified defense fleet was denied. As the Council moved on to discuss trade regulations, the human delegation quietly left the chamber. Outside in the corridor, Ambassador Park stopped and looked back at the crystal doors. They will remember this day, he said quietly to his team. When the darkness comes for them, they will remember that we tried to warn them. Captain Lee activated her communicator. Earth Command, this is Una Lee. The Council rejected our warning. Recommend immediate activation of all contingency protocols. We are on our own. As their transport ship left Nexus Prime, none of the humans looked back. They had work to do, and not much time to do it. The galaxy had chosen to laugh at their warning. Soon they would learn the cost of that laughter. Captain Min Jae-song stared at the empty space where 47 star systems should have been. The bridge of the UES Vigilance hummed quietly around him, but the silence from the sensors felt loud and wrong. He had been patrolling the galaxy's edge for 6 months now, watching the darkness grow. Captain, Lieutenant Hyewon Choi called. From her station, her voice tight with worry. The gravitational readings don't make sense. It's like those systems were never there at all. Min Jae walked over to look at her screen. The computer showed a perfect map of empty space where the new Kepler colonies used to be. Not destroyed planets or dead stars, just nothing. The gravity, wells that should mark where massive suns once burned were completely gone. When did we last hear from them? He asked. 6 days ago, sir. The automated trading beacon just stopped sending signals. No distress call, no emergency broadcast. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. The captain felt a cold weight in his stomach. He had read every classified report from Earth Command about the secret preparations happening throughout human space. While the Galactic Council debated and dismissed their warnings, humanity had been getting ready for war. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belts worked day and night building new types of warships. Scientists on Mars tested weapons that broke 3 different galactic peace treaties. Military planners on Luna created battle, strategies that assumed humanity would fight alone against an enemy no one else believed existed. Send a priority message to Earth Command, Min Jae ordered. Tell them Protocol Omega is now active. The Devourers have arrived. As the faster-than-light message raced toward Earth, refugee ships were already fleeing from the Outer Rim worlds. These survivors brought terrible stories with them. They spoke of fleets that looked like geometric nightmares, ships that seemed to drink light itself. They told of worlds stripped completely bare in just a few hours, their entire populations and resources consumed by machines that moved with perfect coordination. The refugee ship Lucky Star had escaped from the Titan mining colony just hours before it disappeared. Captain Suki Nakamura, a grizzled trader who had worked the Rim for 30 years, arrived at the nearest human outpost with her ship packed full of terrified families. They came out of nowhere, she told the debriefing officer, her hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. Hundreds of ships, each one the size of a moon. They didn't attack the colony, they just started taking it apart piece by piece. The ground, the buildings, even the air itself got sucked up into their ships. Did you see any weapons? The officer asked. That's the thing, Suki replied, staring into her cup. They didn't need weapons. They had these beams that just made things stop existing. One moment the governor's mansion was there, the next it was gone. Not destroyed, not blown up. gone. Similar reports came from across the Outer Rim. The insect-like Chitauri sent desperate messages about their border worlds, going silent. The proud Zephyrians, who had laughed loudest at humanity's warnings, found their patrol fleet simply vanishing without a trace. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council finally held emergency sessions. But instead of planning to fight, they argued about evacuation routes. Speaker Thrinox, the crystal being who had dismissed human concerns, now spoke of strategic withdrawal and protecting core civilization. "We must preserve what we can." His diamond voice rang through the council chambers. "The Outer Rim was always dangerous and uncivilized. We can rebuild there later after this natural disaster passes." But some council members were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Delegate Vexhai of the Merchant Collective, his blob-like body pulsing with nervous colors, raised a concern that made others shift uncomfortably. The humans predicted this exact pattern 18 months ago. He gurgled through his translator. "They showed us maps that match what we're seeing now. Perhaps we should have listened more carefully to their warning." The suggestion created an uncomfortable silence in the chamber. No one wanted to admit that the youngest, most aggressive species in the galaxy might have been right about something so important. Meanwhile, in human space, the real work was beginning. Admiral Kyung-Soo Han reviewed battle plans from his command ship orbiting Earth. The secret preparations were finally being revealed. Massive shipyards hidden in the Kuiper Belt released hundreds of new warships. Weapon factories on distant moons began producing ammunition for guns that officially didn't exist. Dr. Sunmi Lee worked frantically in her laboratory on Luna, perfecting the quantum destabilization warheads that human scientists had developed in secret. The weapons used principles that the galactic scientific community claimed were impossible, but human researchers had never cared much about what others thought was impossible. The first test was successful, she reported to the Defense Council. "The warheads can disrupt matter at the subatomic level. If these devourers are machines, this should hurt them." General Yunji Kang studied intelligence reports from the Outer Rim. The pattern was becoming clear. The devourers moved in perfect formation, consuming everything in their path. They showed no interest in communication or negotiation. They were not conquerors looking for tribute or territory. They were simply hungry, and everything in the galaxy was food. "How long until they reach the core worlds?" she asked her staff. "At their current speed, 18 months to the first major colonies. 3 years to reach the council worlds." The general nodded grimly. "Then we have 3 years to figure out how to kill something that drinks starlight for breakfast." As reports continued to flow in from the spreading darkness, one thing became clear to every human military leader. The galaxy's response to this crisis would be to run and hide. Only humanity seemed willing to stand and fight. The species that had laughed at their warning were about to learn what happened when you ignored the humans who had spent their entire history preparing for the worst possible outcome. Admiral Kyung-Soo Han gripped the railing of his command bridge as the enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace. The sight before him defied every law of physics he understood. 200 massive ships materialized in perfect formation, each one the size of a small moon. Their surfaces were so black they seemed to eat the light from nearby stars, creating holes in space itself. "Commander Soyeon Park, give me numbers," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sir, each vessel shows mass readings equivalent to a planetoid. Energy signatures are off our scales. They're not just using power from their engines. They're actually draining energy from the space around them." Her hands moved quickly over her control panel, but the readings kept climbing higher than her instruments could measure. The joint galactic fleet had assembled at Kepler 442 to make their stand. Admiral Han watched through his tactical display as the pride of galactic civilization prepared to face the unknown enemy. Zephyrian battleships, their blue metal hulls gleaming with plasma weapons that could crack moons. Vyloth crystal cruisers that moved like living jewels through space. Merchant vessels converted into warships, bristling with the best defensive technology money could buy. The battle began when the Zephyrian fleet commander, Admiral Zexthal, opened fire with his most powerful weapons. Plasma bolts that burned, hotter than the surface of stars, streaked across space toward the lead devourer ship. The energy struck the black hull and simply disappeared, absorbed like drops of water into sand. "No effect," reported the Zephyrian tactical officer over the communication channel. "Impossible. Those weapons should have destroyed any known ship." The Devourer fleet began to move, not like normal ships with engines and thrust, but like a single living creature. They flowed through space in perfect coordination, and as they moved, something terrible began to happen to the Galactic fleet. The first merchant vessel simply came apart, not exploded or burned. It unraveled at the molecular level. Its hull plating separated into individual atoms that streamed toward the nearest Devourer ship. The crew's last transmission was cut short as their very bodies were broken down into raw materials. "By the ancestors," whispered Captain Thal of the Veloth forces. "They're not destroying us. They're eating us." The proud crystal ships of the Veloth tried to retreat, but beams of invisible energy reached out from the Devourer fleet. Where the beams touched, the living crystal hulls cracked and shattered. Pieces of the ships were drawn inexorably toward the mechanical monsters feeding their endless hunger. Admiral Han watched his allies die in the most horrifying way possible. 14 minutes. That was how long the galaxy's finest military forces lasted against an enemy that humanity had tried to warn them about 2 years ago. "All human vessels," he broadcast on the encrypted channel that only Earth ships could receive. "Execute Battle Plan Doctrine 7. Show them what happens when they ignore our warnings." The human fleet had been hanging back, studying the enemy, while their allies died. Now they moved forward with grim determination. The UES Phoenix, commanded by Captain Jaehyun Lim, fired the first shot. The kinetic penetrator round had been accelerated to 97% of light speed. Behind it came a spread of quantum destabilization warheads that existed only in theoretical physics papers, until human scientists had made them real. The lead Devourer ship staggered. For the first time in millions of years, something had hurt them. The perfect geometric hull cracked along stress lines that revealed the alien mathematics of their construction. Dark fluid, that might have been blood or machine oil, leaked out into space. Every sensor on every ship, human and alien alike, registered the impossible. The Devourer fleet stopped moving. Their perfect coordination wavered as they turned their attention to these strange bipedal creatures who had actually managed to damage them. "Contact!" shouted Colonel Minjae from the tactical station aboard, the Phoenix. The quantum warheads disrupted their molecular cohesion. "We hurt the bastards." But the Devourers adapted quickly. The damaged ship began to repair itself, drawing matter from the debris of destroyed alien vessels. The wound in its hull sealed over with new material that looked different from the original, stronger, more resistant. Admiral Han realized with growing horror that they were learning. Every human weapon that struck them was analyzed, understood, and countered. The enemy wasn't just consuming matter and energy. They were consuming knowledge itself. "Sir?" Commander Park called from her station. "The enemy is changing formation. They're focusing on us now." The mechanical fleet began to move toward the human ships with new purpose. Their movements became more aggressive, more directed. Where before they had simply consumed whatever was in their path, now they were actively hunting. Captain Taehyun Jung of the UES Defiance fired a spread of traditional nuclear missiles, knowing they would be useless but hoping to buy time for the other ships to retreat. The warheads detonated against Devourer shields in brilliant flashes that lit up the darkness of space. The explosions were beautiful and completely ineffective. "Admiral," Jung reported over the communications channel, "conventional weapons are useless. Only the quantum warheads seem to cause any damage, and they're adapting to those too." Han made the hardest decision of his military career. "All ships, implement fighting withdrawal. We've learned what we came to learn. Now we need to get this information back to Earth." As the human fleet began to retreat, the Devourers sent a message. Not through radio or any communication system the humans recognized, but directly into their minds. The words appeared in perfect Korean, somehow translated from thoughts that had never been biological. "We know you now, little builders of weapons. You are different from the others. We will remember you." The surviving human ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the terrible knowledge that their enemy was not just powerful, but intelligent. The Devourers had recognized humanity as a threat worth studying. Behind them, the mechanical fleet continued its work, consuming the wreckage of the Galactic fleet and adding their technology to their own growing arsenal. The species that had laughed at humanity's warnings were now feeding the very enemy they had refused to prepare for. Admiral Han stared at the tactical display showing their retreat. The real war was just beginning. General Yunji Kang stood at the observation deck of New Seoul Station, watching long lines of alien refugees waiting outside the security checkpoints. 6 months ago, these same beings had laughed at humanity's warnings in the Galactic Council chambers. Now they begged for protection from the species they had called primitive and paranoid. The Vyloth delegation looked pitiful with their crystal forms dim and cracked from stress. Their proud leader, Sub-Speaker Velthar, approached the human immigration officer with his diamond head bowed low. Behind him, families of crystal beings carried their few remaining possessions in simple bags. "Please," Velthar said through his translator, his musical voice now sounding broken and desperate. "Our homeworlds are gone. We have nowhere else to go. We will work. We will serve. We will do whatever you ask." Major Do-hyun Park, the immigration officer, looked up from his datapad. 6 months ago, this same Veloth had voted against every human proposal in the council. Now he stood like a beggar at humanity's door. "The general will see you shortly," Do-hyun said simply. "Please wait with the others." The scene repeated itself throughout human space. Zephyrian refugees, their blue tentacles trembling with fear, offered their plasma technology in exchange for safe harbor. The merchant collective promised their entire trade network to humanity, if only the humans would protect their remaining worlds. Even the proud insect warriors of the Chitauri swallowed their pride and asked to join the human military. General Kang reviewed the integration reports on her tablet. The numbers were staggering. Over 50 million alien refugees had fled to human space in the past 3 months. Each group brought their own technology, their own knowledge, their own desperate hope that the humans who had warned them might also be able to save them. "Ma'am," reported her aide, Lieutenant Soyeon Kim, "the Zephyrian engineers have successfully integrated their plasma conduits with our railgun systems. Initial tests show a 40% increase in projectile velocity. And the Veloth crystal matrices? They're working with our AI specialists on Luna. The quantum processing power has increased by a factor of 10. Our computers can now run battle simulations that would have taken months in just a few hours." The Forge world of New Pittsburgh had become the symbol of this unlikely cooperation. In massive factories that ran 24 hours a day, human engineers worked alongside alien specialists to create weapons that had never existed before. Zephyrian plasma technology flowed through human weapon systems. Veloth crystal computers calculated firing solutions for human ships. Merchant industrial equipment was converted to mass-produce ammunition for the coming war. But the real battle was happening in space, where Admiral Seung-hwan Cho led humanity's mobile defense fleets in a deadly game of cat and mouse with the advancing Devourer forces. Every engagement cost human lives, but each battle taught them more about their enemy. Captain Won-ho Kim brought his damaged cruiser back to the new Mars shipyards after the latest skirmish. His report to Admiral Cho was grim but informative. "They're learning faster than we hoped, sir. The quantum warheads that worked so well in the first battle are now only 50% effective. The Devourers are adapting their hull composition to resist our weapons." Admiral Cho studied the battle recordings on his command screen. The mechanical enemy ships moved with increasing intelligence, using tactics that seemed almost biological in their cleverness. They were no longer the mindless consumers they had first appeared to be. "How long before they become completely immune to our current weapons?" he asked. "Dr. Soon-mi Lee estimates maybe 6 months, sir. After that, we'll need entirely new approaches." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Won-ho Kim had been a professor of ancient mythology before the war began. Now he worked as a military consultant, studying every piece of data about the Devourers that human forces had gathered. He stood before the Emergency War Council in the depths of Luna Base, his presentation displaying ancient alien texts, alongside modern sensor readings. "I believe I understand what we're fighting," he said, his voice filled with excitement and horror. "The Devourers aren't just machines. They're the remains of a species that chose to give up their biological bodies millions of years ago." "General," Kang leaned forward in her chair. "Explain." "They achieved what they thought was perfection, pure mechanical existence without the weakness of flesh. But to maintain their artificial bodies and expand their civilization, they needed raw materials. So they began consuming other worlds, other species." The doctor activated another display, showing the pattern of devourer attacks across the galaxy. "They don't see other life forms as people. To them, we're just raw materials waiting to be processed. But this gives us an advantage." "What kind of advantage?" asked Admiral Cho. "They think in terms of pure logic and efficiency. They cannot understand concepts that seem illogical or wasteful. Things like sacrifice without benefit, fighting impossible odds, or..." He smiled grimly. "Human spite." General Kang felt something, cold and dangerous, settle in her chest. She had been born on a world where her grandfather had died fighting impossible odds against alien invaders. Her family had a long tradition of spite. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "We stop trying to fight them logically. We start fighting them like humans. We do things that make no sense, that serve no strategic purpose, that exist only to hurt them because we can." Around the table, the military leaders began to smile. These were humans whose ancestors had fought wars with sticks and stones, who had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have destroyed them. They understood spite. "The next phase of our battle plan," General Kang announced, "will be Operation Prometheus. We're going to teach these machines what it means to make humanity angry." Outside the conference room, alien refugees worked alongside, human technicians building weapons for a war they barely understood. They had come seeking protection from the species they had once mocked. Soon, they would learn why laughing at human warnings was the galaxy's greatest mistake. Captain Taehyun Jung strapped himself into the pilot's seat of the UES Indomitable and looked around at his crew one last time. They all knew this was a suicide mission. The ship carried humanity's most dangerous weapon, not explosives or energy, beams, but something far more deadly to the mechanical minds of the Devourers. "Lieutenant Nayoung Han," he called to his communications officer, "are you ready to transmit the paradox virus?" "Yes, sir. The quantum transmission array is charged and ready. Dr. Wonho Kim's virus is loaded into our computers." She paused, then added quietly, "Sir, the AI systems are already showing stress from just containing this code. Are we sure this will work?" Captain Jung smiled grimly. "The Devourers think in perfect logic. They process information flawlessly, make calculations without error, and follow rules that never change. We're about to introduce them to human thinking." The virus was pure human madness converted into computer code. It contained mathematical equations that proved their own impossibility, logical arguments that reached contradictory conclusions, and at its heart, the question that had driven human philosophers crazy for thousands of years. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Across 17 star systems, the final battle of Operation Prometheus began. Admiral Youngmin Park coordinated the attack from his flagship, watching as human fleets engaged the Devourer Collective in desperate combat. The mechanical ships moved with their usual perfect coordination, but something was different. They seemed more aggressive, more focused on destroying rather than simply consuming. "They're learning to hate us," observed Commander Jiwan Lee from the tactical station. "Look at their attack patterns. They're not just trying to harvest us anymore. They want us dead." Admiral Park nodded. "Good. Anger makes you stupid. Let's see how their perfect logic handles raw emotion." The Indomitable raced toward the center of the Devourer fleet, its engines pushed far beyond safe limits. Enemy ships turned to intercept, but Captain Jung's crew had studied every battle, every tactical recording. They knew exactly how the mechanical minds would react. "Evasive maneuvers," Jung ordered. "Pattern Chaos 7. The ship began to fly in a pattern that made no tactical sense. It zigzagged randomly, accelerated and decelerated without reason, and performed maneuvers that wasted fuel and time. To human eyes, it looked like the actions of a panicked pilot. To the Devourers trying to calculate the ship's destination, it was impossible to predict. "We're through their outer perimeter," reported the navigator. 2 minutes to the command. Nexus. "Beginning virus transmission," Lieutenant Han announced. Her hands shook as she activated the quantum communicator. "Sir, our AI is starting to malfunction just from processing this code. I don't know how long our systems can handle it." The Paradox virus raced through space at faster than light speeds, seeking the Devourer communication network. When it found its target, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in their millions of years of existence, the Devourers experienced doubt. The virus didn't try to damage their systems or steal their data. Instead, it asked them impossible questions. "If you consume everything, what will you consume when nothing is left? Can you create a problem so complex that even you cannot solve it?" What is the sound of one hand clapping? Across the Devourer fleet, perfect mechanical minds began to stutter. Ships that had moved in flawless formation started to drift as their AI systems tried to process concepts that had no logical answers. Some vessels actually stopped moving entirely, their computers locked in infinite loops trying to solve unsolvable riddles. "It's working," shouted Commander Lee from the flagship. "Their formation is breaking apart. Half their fleet has stopped responding to commands. But the Devourers were learning even from this. The virus that crippled some ships was being analyzed by others. Soon they would develop immunity to humanity's philosophical weapon. Admiral Park made the hardest decision of the war. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance. Prepare for stellar ignition." The stellar ignition bombs were humanity's final weapon, devices that could force a star to explode early. They had been placed secretly around key stars along the galaxy's edge, waiting for this moment. The plan was simple and insane. Create a wall of burning stars that nothing could pass through. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "if we detonate those bombs, the radiation will sterilize dozens of star systems. Any human colonies in the area will be destroyed." "I know," Park replied. "Signal the colonies to evacuate. We have 12 hours to get everyone out." As human ships raced to rescue their own people, the Devourer fleet began to recover from the virus attack. Their mechanical minds had found ways to quarantine the paradoxical thoughts, to process them without being paralyzed by their impossibility. They were adapting as they always did. "Detonation in 10 seconds, reported the weapons officer. "All colonies report evacuation complete." The stars began to burn. Across the galaxy's edge, 27 stars exploded in coordinated supernovae. The light was visible from thousands of light years away, a brilliant barrier of nuclear fire that would burn for millions of years. The Devourer fleet, caught in the expanding waves of radiation and plasma, began to retreat for the first time in their existence. But before they fled, they sent one final message to humanity. The words appeared directly in the minds of every human in the fleet, translated perfectly into their language. "We know you now, humans. We will remember you. We will return when your species is gone and your stars are cold. This is not over." Captain Young, his ship now safely beyond the burning barrier, transmitted humanity's response across the galaxy. "We'll be waiting, and we'll be ready." Years later, Ambassador Soo-Young Kim stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers, now relocated to Earth. Through the transparent dome overhead, she could see the memorial garden, where the names of every species were carved in stone, those who had laughed at humanity's warnings and those who had died defending them. The rim stars still burned bright, humanity's wall of fire keeping watch over the galaxy. And in the depths of space, automated defense platforms built by human hands waited patiently for the day the Devourers might return. The galaxy had learned its lesson. When humans give a warning, you listen.